So where are the low-hanging fruits, do you think, for initial deployments of SDN? And I'm talking about the wide area network because it's taken for granted that SDN's already in the data center, but where does it get into the WAN first?
Well, so a couple of different places. I mean, one area that we struggle with is under a large range of different types of services that are consumed, particularly by the mass market, the consumer market, puts different constraints and different types of services being offered through the network. And right now, it's very onerous, very costly the way we use IP routing to go between the appliances, which might be real appliances, boxes, or they might just be software on a server, whether it's firewalls, whether it's some types of screening, security functions. It could be value-added functions like transcoding, transrating of video services, CDN services. Those all get stitched together today at the IP layer in a fairly static fashion. Yeah. Right? You're going through, and the packets basically go through all those appliances, whether the customer signed up for all those services or not. And unfortunately, it's just the way it works because we're doing source and destination routing. SDN early on can be looked at as a mechanism to do service-aware routing, which means basically traffic steering and global load balancing, so that based not just on the information in the packet, but tying that back to the subscription of the user, and tying that back to what type of service is coming over the network. Where did they click on? Was it a video clip from YouTube, or was it a SIP call they're initiating? Taking all that information into account as you decide how to move those packets through the network. Do they have to go to a certain appliance and skip others? Do they get certain treatment because of the QoS that's different than maybe web surfing? Okay,
so you're really talking about applying SDN at a granularity of an individual subscriber accessing an individual service.
That would be, yes, that's correct. Service-aware routing is how we refer to it. And it's tying static information, which would be user profile information, network policy information, to the information that already comes to us in the network, such as the information in the packet header. Yep.
We actually, we completely agree, because we're doing exactly what you're saying today with one of our operator partners. So to your point, today it's predefined static service chaining today. So each and every, it's on a subscriber level rather than a service level. So if you have an SDN controller at the edge of the network, on a gateway, for instance, and having AAA information and other service information, you will be able to really pass these packets through the network elements that needed to pass through, and you don't have to do it multiple times. So the benefit of it, I mean, one could argue that the latency is not that much, but the bigger benefit is CPU loads, hardware cost for things that you're not really utilizing at all and have no service awareness. Right. And this is something we're...
But I think this is one of the areas in which SDN and network functions virtualization plays together very nicely, because the kinds of functions that we're talking about steering individual flows through will become expressed as virtualized software appliances on these server farms. So, when you virtualize these service functions, then you need to virtualize and abstract away the network complexity of stitching them into each service flow on a per demand kind of basis.
Yeah. The reason I bring that application up, it's an important one. It's one that we quickly add value to the consumer experience, which is good for our brand, right? Yeah. But it's also one that can take advantage of some of the SDN framework without requiring OpenFlow. Yeah. OpenFlow or some other protocol down to control the switches would add additional efficiency. Yeah. But you can run this as an overlay where you're really just using the underlying IP topology again, but then run software enabled capabilities.
Okay, so not necessarily with a fully abstracted control plane.
Separating the control planes. So this is a model almost called an overlay, where you still have an underlying IP control plane that's created the topology, which is fairly static, particularly in an access network. Doesn't change much in an access network. But then you're writing over those pipes, but not relying on the underlying IP routing protocols to make the decisions. You're providing this service-aware routing. Okay. Another place that we see this is in the area of analytics, because you raised that already, Joe, and that's huge. I mean, everyone's interested in gathering as much information, not that we know exactly what it's going to mean, but if we have a lot of information, there's a lot of good data scientists out there that can help find some interesting correlations, right? We're starting to collect tremendous amounts of information. And sort of the old school way of doing it is we collect it and you send it all up to a database someplace, and then you apply your analytics tools and go through it. Well, it turns out that in a complex network like a Verizon wireless network, the capacity of an overlay network or separate network to collect all that quickly grows bigger than the actual network itself.
Yeah.
So I think the cost structure just doesn't make sense. So there's an opportunity where something like OpenFlow can really play a role, because it's not that you really need to collect every piece of information from every collector point in the network all the time. You probably are always monitoring something all the time for the health of the network. But when you really want to understand, who in the San Francisco area is on an iPad 2 running XYZ application, you don't need to collect that all the time. That's a query that you want to make. So you want the ability to not only query the data collectors, the probes, the appropriate analytic tools, but also really spin up the network appropriately to collect that information for that period of time that you need it, and then go back into the resource pool for other queries.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting example where that would allow you to have a cost-effective network, but still do very sophisticated analytics collection and queries.